Okay, well, welcome to everybody from Zoom land. We're going to finish up part two, which is the middle section dealing with Christian morality. Then we're going to take a break. I've had a very interesting day, and part of that's been communications with different people and others in the Patriarchate. Of course, as you can imagine, there's a great deal of concern and movement and action happening within our Patriarchate. I've even seen pictures of crosses being removed from the domes of our churches and all of this. So it's hitting very hard. The Catholic Archbishop of Aleppo has said that this probably spells the end of Christian presence in that part of Syria, period. So we don't get a great deal of American news about these kinds of things, which is really kind of sad. But anyway, I'll try to keep everybody posted as I get some insider information. I haven't done it yet, but I'll talk to our son Sean's mother-in-law, who gets her news in Arabic from Aleppo. So that'll give me another different kind of angle. Yeah, but anyway, we need to keep those people in our prayers for sure.
Are they trying to migrate out of the area, the Christians?
For the most part, they would be delighted to be able to do that, but they've hunkered down. I mean, this strike was so fast and so complete. There was hardly any time for Christians to even be prepared. Took everybody by surprise. Yeah. Okay. Dot, 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 dot. I also spoke to Father Joseph Kimmett today. I haven't spoken in quite a long time, and he sends his greetings to everybody. For those of you that don't know who he is, he's actually a son of this parish and was actually ordained a deacon here in this parish. So he's now the Prostaminos of St. George in Norwood, Massachusetts, and the place is thriving. They don't have enough room. So there you go. It's another one of those stories. I can't wait for that to happen here. Yeah. No room at the inn. We'll put it out there, yeah. Okay. Well, keep in mind the very first sentence of this particular section, in which Metropolitan Hilarion says, "No person in human history has exercised such influence on the spiritual and moral development of human society as Jesus Christ." I'm really struggling with how to line up and make the case for everything that I'm identifying as things we just simply must have here if we're going to pull it off. And one of them, of course, is Zoom equipment for all you folks that are Zooming, but beyond that. So I found out today that the podcast equipment that I'm going to need, they no longer give it to the podcasters. That you got to buy your own. So anyway, I keep working on this budget for things that we need. But one of the other things is I know what I want to do for Great Lent this year in the community, and it's very much centered upon that sentence that I just read from Metropolitan Hilarion. It's a kind of theme that I've been trying to carry over here, but I told you all some time back that I have a friend who's a professor at Notre Dame who has done this really, really remarkable series. I've now watched it 2 times. And to get me to watch anything 2 times like that is well, just ask my wife. Every time she wants me to see a movie we've already seen. It's those kinds of things. But it just has me really spinning. I'm not quite sure how to compact it because it's a 12-part series. It's broken down very neatly with what you hear, and then the questions for the group that follow. but it's a very visual thing, and so I need all of that kind of equipment in addition to being able to zoom it out to the people that live, you know, on the extremes of the border. But anyway, that's the point of that, which is this is a series he was asked to do by the Greek Metropolitan of Chicago on answering that question: who is Jesus Christ? Who do people say that I am? And I'm convinced, as the priest here, that we got a long ways to go in our own faith community of being able to answer that adequately. And this is like a gift to us. So that's going to be the adult study during Great Lent this year. Okay. So based around that, um, when we look at section 6, which is on page 154 in your books, he begins, with a headline here which just says family ethics. We live in a culture in which things like family values has been deeply, deeply politicized. So when we talk about family values in an American cultural context, it often just polarizes people immediately in terms of politics and other such things. Now, why is that?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to come at this, but
Yeah.
power politics, the notion of the patriarchy, of having the head of the family as a microcosm of the head of the church, that's repulsive and foreboding within this intersectional view of the universe, this Marxist view of the universe. Anybody who has power is bad.
Okay.
And number one, and number two, flowing from that is that if no one's in control, then you are in control. So the wife's in control of her life, the husband's in control of his life, the children are in control of their lives. There's nobody top down trying to form the family. It's just everybody doing their own thing.
Okay. That's good. Anybody else got some things to throw in there?
But we don't need Marx. We all want to do our own thing anyway. So we go back to Genesis. It's all good.
So yeah, and it's got a section here. He's talking about freedom. That's related to this. How do we Christians understanding freedom? Individualism is again, it's a very cultural kind of thing for us as Americans. When I figure it out in my life, I haven't got that figured out yet. I'll try to share with the community a link to the New York Post article that appeared last week regarding all the men that are being attracted to Orthodoxy and the spike in the numbers of men embracing Orthodoxy. So in a sense, it's a kind of an unfair article in that talking to a lot of priests, I would say young families with small children are probably in the greater number of the converts, but it wouldn't make the news, like something with why are these men doing this? And Reader Nectarios and I both had a laugh, where there's a reference to this almost, as the British say, gobsmacked with the idea of fasting for 40 days and services that sometimes last for 2 hours. Oh my word. Father Joseph Kimmett, by the way, told me that the recent vigil with Metropolitan Saba for New England lasted 5.5 hours. So my brothers and sisters, the quick down and dirty of the days of Metropolitan Philip are obviously something on the history books now.
Sounds like they did the whole thing.
And more. I just can't imagine. But anyhow, that was the whole point, that this is something that's attractive to a certain segment of our society and our culture. Okay. So, one has to be a little bit puzzled when we live in a culture in which a phrase like family values is seen by fairly high percentage, maybe 50%, maybe more, of the society as a negative term. So when we talk here about family ethics, okay, we get down to Christ's teaching on marriage and divorce. Okay, so there's quite a section here on marriage and divorce, and I'm leaving that to you. And he's got little footnotes from the basis of social concept of the Russian Orthodox Church. But I'd rather, as I said, let you read through what he has to say there. I'm going to try from a pastoral perspective to respond to this and make some clarity, and then we'll open up the floor a little bit because this is worthy of a discussion. Okay? Am I clear? Maybe not so clear? Okay. The question of where does the Orthodox Church stand on divorce is certainly in the sort of top 5 questions that generally comes out of the mouth of someone who's exploring orthodoxy. And I think one of the reasons for that is divorce, again, has now surpassed the 50% mark in American culture. More than half of marriages in American culture end in divorce now. Okay? So we are dealing with a high percentage of the population that have been impacted by divorce. If not actually divorced themselves, there are children of divorced marriages. There are parents of divorced children. You've got all of that sort of thing that impacts things, okay? So there are different ways in which different traditions have dealt with this, but most people are of a mindset that the Orthodox Church must be just like the Roman Catholic Church in how it approaches divorce, and I would say, and remarriage, okay? So the Roman Catholic approach to divorce is what?
Once and done. It's pretty much, at least unless they've changed the rules in the last decade.
Yes, well,
You're
yeah.
once, and if you get divorced, you're out.
Yes, well, on the books, sort of, but there is a process of seeking an annulment.
Right.
And so there's actually a whole procedure that goes directly to Rome. Okay? And it's a very legalistic kind of thing with a lot of interviews and all the rest. And what they're looking for is some impediment for which the Roman Church could then say a marriage did not exist here, or there was present in that marriage an impediment that kept it from becoming a full flowering marital union. Okay?
It's a sacrament.
It's what?
It's a sacrament.
Yes. It is one of the mysteries of the church.
To sack the animal that's dead.
Yes. Well, I'm just giving you the process. Okay. Yeah. So the question of annulment. Let's deal with that. Does the Orthodox Church have a process for an annulment?
No.
Okay. We don't have a process for an annulment in the same way. Okay. That's again, and I'm not criticizing any tradition outside of our own. The only place where we Orthodox can pass any judgments is within our own house. What's happening outside the boundaries? What's that? There is a process, yes, okay? Now, I'm going to put my 2 cents in on that one, too, okay? One of the reasons I was speaking to Father Joseph Kimma today is I am trying to get some clarity on re-entry into the Antiochian Orthodox Christian Archdiocese of North America. Honestly, I mean, we are the perfect example of that phrase. I do not belong to an organized religion. I'm Orthodox. Okay, so Orthodoxy. Okay, let's see if we can clean this up a little bit. So Rome has a very legalistic style of interpreting canon law. I mean, the very name, canon law, trained canon lawyers, all of that. There's a process. And as I said, they're looking for that impediment, okay? One of the best impediments, I mean, if you're a parish priest and you're looking for one and it's like, got it, okay, because it'll sail right through, it happens to be if she is pregnant. Because then, of course, she is under undue pressure to marry, and one should not be under any pressure to marry, to enter into that union, okay? So if you can actually show that she was expecting child, that's the easiest of the impediments. But there are others, okay? So you go through that process, okay? It can sometimes take a long time to get that kind of judgment. Sometimes no. And I can't answer the whys and wherefores of that. It's just that's a fact, okay? So then we have our own house to deal with, okay? Now here's a problem. This is a real problem in Orthodox Christianity. And I'm being recorded, so here it is. And if I get a deposition letter, you know, that's fine with me. I have recently come to the conclusion that I think I might like ending my life like the last emperor of China. Remember how he ended his life in that 5-hour-long movie? The last emperor of China ended his life as a gardener in public gardens in communist China. Okay, or the Godfather. And how'd the Godfather die? He was in his garden with a grandchild. Okay, when he keeled over there. So great. I decided I could do that. Okay, that'd make me happy. So if I get a deposition letter, fine. I'm just going to gardening. Done. But way too many of my brother priests fall into what Father George Florowski often referred to as Western captivity, a Western way of thinking, and this kind of legalistic mindset. And I have been blessed to sit with some very, very remarkable elders in my time. And one thing that always comes through with that is whatever we do as Orthodox Christians, it is a pastoral approach. And a pastoral approach, which means that however we interpret a text in Scripture or a code from canon law, or whatever it happens to be, it's interpreted for the salvation of that individual soul. So Rome can look at that and think, man, those Easterners, they're so sloppy. You know, well, it's because we operate in canon law with ascrivia, a certain strictness, and economia. But that's not open for anybody. There's a way in which that process it works. So the other thing that's important for us to understand, and this is all lining up here with what's in this section, we don't set precedent in the Orthodox Church. So in Rome, it's like the secular civil world. There's precedent that's set. You can go to the code book and pull these things off, okay? In the Orthodox Church, each case is weighed on its own individual merit. So you can't say because this decision was made for Bob and Cindy that it applies now to George and Jeannie. Doesn't. Each case has to be standing on its own merits or faults or whatever that happens to be.
You're giving us the ideal, but that's not really what happens in practice, I don't think.
I'm giving you the Orthodox truth.
That's true.
And and where it gets abused and misinterpreted is what Florowski would say, because there are too many Orthodox priests who lean into the Roman legal way of doing things, and I think that's a problem. Okay, now I told you all we're going to have a nice section on confession at some point. You know, hopefully for everybody. But you know, I've been told by my Father Confessor that if I end up in hell, it'll be because I over-identify with my penitents. Okay? Their sins are my sins, period. All right, so, you know, maybe that's a fault line with me. But anyway, there we have it, okay? So, what Metropolitan Valerian has done here is he outlines very clearly what we glean from Jesus in terms of the scriptures and the teaching, and the references here to second and third marriages. So the Orthodox Church, I'm finally getting to the point where I want to get, recognizes there is no kind of magic annulment to say no marriage, a marriage didn't exist. It is, as Reader Nectario said, they have gone through one of the mysteries of the church, okay? They have been crowned. The prayers have been said, okay? So what we deal with in the Orthodox Church in terms of what I was saying about the pastoral approach is we recognize that because of sin, there exists such things as the breakdown of marriages. It's as simple as that. And so it's not like a no-fault divorce. Each side needs to recognize the presence of sin that contributes to the breakdown in the marriage. But then it's when it's very clear that the marriage has reached that point where it is over, the Orthodox Church deals with that in a pastoral way. And yes, there is this time period of penance, okay? That sort of drives home the sobriety of the seriousness of marriage. But then, one may enter into a second or even a third marriage. But as I said, each one of those gets weighed on its own, okay? Because there are different circumstances in each and every case. So in this archdiocese, and that's where I'm trying to get some clarity, it used to be that the priest filled out these blah, blah, blah things, and you sent in a check for, I don't know what it was, $200 or something? It's what? $250. I was close. I said $200. Maybe inflation from since my day. God only knows. Okay. So, at the clergy retreat for this diocese, we were told that when Metropolitan Sabo was told about this practice when he was recently in Houston, he said, "Oh, I don't like that at all." So then the question is, are we still doing it or not? And I can't get a straight answer on this one. Okay, I did have one priest who simply said to me, "I just never bother with it anyway, and I never have." Okay, so it's like, oh, there you go.
All right.
So it's all kind of out there. And then at the same time, it is, as Seraphima just said, there is a process, there's an acknowledged process for doing this, okay? Usually in a second marriage, there are certain things omitted from the rite, like the crowning, unless one of the partners has never been crowned. Then the crowning is included there, okay? Got that part? All right, so I said I'd make a big mess and throw it all out there and see what sticks to the wall, then I'd open it up for questions. And I'll have a drink.
It's funny that you mentioned that you're going to be talking about confession, because really the way the Orthodox Church deals with this as it is a sin that needs to be dealt with and healed within a confessional framework. And so even the penance that might occur as a consequence of a divorce, really, I mean, there are penances given for all sorts of
things.
It's a holistic view, okay? It's not like divorce is some very special thing, but rather it's just part of the whole life, the whole universe of sin.
I think Kent has a good point, and I guess because I might be the only person in here in this room that's been divorced as an Orthodox. It's not all bad, because that time period that my personal penance was for a year, and I had to do a lot of other stuff in addition to that, in addition to the $250 check. But the things that you're asked to do are difficult, but no more difficult than the entire experience in and of itself. I mean, it's a horrible laughed about that and that, you know, whatever. But
You're talking about the $250? I can tell you as a priest, I'm appalled by that.
it was just part of the.
It really rubs me wrong.
Well, you know, it's not any worse. It's a bad experience all the way around. It's not something I would wish on my worst enemy from day one to the end of all of it. It's terrible. So it kind of is.
Yeah, you know, if that was like covering the cost for a marriage tribunal to fly into Englewood, New Jersey, and review your particular case that's submitted by your parish priest, who knows you better than anybody.
The check was easier than the letter I had to write to the metropolitan, who I'd never met before, which was my autobiographical history of my marriage. That was
Right.
hard to
Okay.
send a letter after you already talked to your priest about it. Then you send a letter to a man that I've never done the
Okay.
But I'm just saying, it's not all that. It's bad in a good way.
Right. Anyway, one gets past that part, and then one celebrates marriage, and one works on making the second marriage strong and fruitful and blessed, and all of those other things. Reader Nectarius used the word healing. Healing, again, is always central in everything that we're doing here. And I can tell you again, as a confessor, I have had several times in which I've had to remind the penitent that what they were confessing, in other words, you know, I'm divorced, blah, 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 blah. It's like a repeat, okay? So the healing has to come when one needs to be helped to get past the point where you're stuck at that point in your life. You got to move beyond that. And again, that's part of the pastoral job, not only of the priest, but your faith community should be able to assist you in actually moving on and getting on with it. Easier said than done, but if you've got an actual active faith community of which you're part, it works wonderfully. Okay, any questions about any of that? You look glum. Poor Father Chad, he made everybody miserable tonight, you see. There you go, okay? So, the last thing I want to say about this is an Orthodox understanding of marriage is not contractual. Why did I just say that?
Because it's not legalistic.
Well, because the Western Church frames everything in a juridical canon law approach, and so that's why they ask the question, well, was this really a marriage or not? Well, of course it was a marriage.
Yeah.
Of course it was.
Yeah.
This isn't juridical.
Okay.
I mean, if it falls apart, it's because of sin. It's not because somebody's finger was crossed.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
So, we just touched upon something that the contractual thing comes from the West. And in the West, historically, the church really got commingled in with the kind of civil kinds of things. The church became the sort of caretaker of civil actions. The vows that are taken in the West are contractual kinds of things. Do we do those vows? No, not there. Okay? All right. So, on page 157, kind of right in the middle, just above the big bold word children, the Christian marital union is union in the Lord. Now that's very, very important here, because that's one of the main emphasis that's put into an Orthodox marriage, which is it's a trinity. The Lord is there. The Lord is present. And one must constantly be reminded of that as you struggle to work out your salvation in the marriage context. The Orthodox Church is very clear that we work out our salvation basically in two states, either the married state or the monastic state. And both of them involve community life, accountability, structure, all of those kinds of things in order to make it work. Okay? In the Orthodox Church, the actual wedding rite, there are several times in which one prays for the couple to be blessed with children. Okay? That's another thing which, in terms of American culture, in which we live, and we all understand couples that are infertile and cannot conceive and all of that, okay? We're not talking about that kind of thing, but we are talking about the actual choice, which is not to bear children. And if you're paying attention to surveys, that's like off the chart high with couples now, off the chart high. So our rite is driving home the point during the wedding that you may be blessed with children. Okay, and the a question of birth control, okay, will also come up anytime you're having a conversation with potential converts or whatever else it happens to be. Okay, now here's where you really skate out in it. This is one of those things which basically is not yet firmly settled in the Orthodox Church. What? What did Father Chad just say? He's speaking some kind of heresy, I'm sure. No. The Great and Holy Council, which we had been anticipating since the 1920s, 1922, I believe exactly. And then, we had a Second World War and a few other things and interrupted whatever, okay? That kept very serious pastoral issues from being dealt with at the Council of Crete. In fact, the Council of Crete ended up not being much of a council at all. Another thing to get me deposed. But when the largest of the patriarchates didn't show up, Russia, that puts a pretty big dent in things. And Antioch did not show, and neither did Serbia. So, a lot of those kind of pastoral issues that should have been dealt with there were not. So, you get a variety of how priests respond to that question, but it really does come down to this. Any kind of abortifacient birth control is a no, okay? So what their couples are practicing, it can't be that one, but it needs to be worked out in the context with your spiritual father or your spiritual mother, okay? You work it out there. So you get other kind of responses from other priests, which is, even stronger than the Church of Rome, down to, an erroneous thing, which is well, it's a private matter. No, it's not a private matter. And one needs to be very clear about what's clear in the Orthodox Church, recognizing again that you're going to work this thing out with a spiritual father and a mother, if needed. We clear on that one? Or did I make another mess? Clear? Okay. You're such an easy crowd. I don't know. Okay. And his last paragraph there in section 6, it's another hot button issue of our day, which is the Orthodox tradition recognizes as marriage only a union between a man and a woman. A union that is founded upon mutual love and that has one of its main goals, the birth of children and their upbringing. Alternative forms of cohabitation, which have become widespread in modern society, cannot be considered a marriage and do not receive the Church's blessing. Okay? Well, he's covering a whole wide section of things there. Okay? So what do I as a priest get to deal with? Although I'm given where I've been able to do the teaching and not so much of the on-front practice. But the couples that come in and they've been cohabitating for 2 years to give it all a big test run to see whether this works or not. What's going to be the approach there? well, we want to get this right and get married in the church.
Well, you need to repent. There needs to be spiritual healing.
Mhm.
Probably a time of penance.
Yeah.
Quit doing what you're doing until you're married.
Yes. So there we are, kind of back there again. I would back it a little bit further and say one of the first things I have to do is actually get down to talking about where does the Orthodox Church get its teaching from and why. And one needs to have that kind of conversation. I will tell you, as a priest, I have weighed this out many different ways. There are some priests who simply say, well, you've got to exit and, can't live in the same apartment or whatever it is. Okay, there are those priests. This old priest has not been that strict about certain things, dealing with financial realities and some other things, but that's when I get to have a relationship with this couple and I'm beginning to understand things. And then they say to me, yes, we're willing to commit ourselves to a chaste life under the same roof until we get this marriage blessed in the church. Okay. So if they want to burn me at the stake on that one or whatever, go ahead. But anyway, as I said earlier, there is no precedent. So I have to deal with each one as it comes along.
Oh, and it's almost as if they're coming to confession in that stage.
It is.
I mean, they're coming for healing.
Because it's almost always some form of the phrase that we want to set this right now.
Yes.
Okay? Yeah. One of the things that I also will weigh in that one is I want to know what the motivating factor is for them coming to finally say it's time. If it's grandma who's threatening to take them out of her will, that's not quite the right thing that I need to hear in terms of the motivation. Yeah, there you go. Okay. All right. So there we are. So now you know why the Orthodox Church is just like a salmon going the wrong way in the stream. It's just we're going in a totally different direction than the culture that surrounds us. Okay. So he's got number 7, the upbringing of children. I'm going to leave that sort of section to you for the most part. But I as a priest, I really resonated where he's describing what we do with our children in terms of we initiate them early in their life, okay, and right after baptism and chrismation, what do?
Communion.
They receive communion, okay. So unfortunately, things have evolved, and there's a historical thing about it. You'll get parents who come up and bring their children to communion, and they don't commune. And it's not that they're under some kind of penance. It's just that they have. We have this whole cultural thing in many of our Orthodox churches where one rarely ever goes to communion, period. It's pretty clear the Serbian Orthodox Church was influenced by non-communicating masses in the West in the medieval period. Okay, and then you get some extreme teaching to which it scares the bejeebers out of everybody. The worst I've ever heard was one of my Russian seminarians who said that his Baba, his grandmother, said to him, "Never take communion at Pascha, because hookers and other undesirables take communion that night. So don't go anywhere near the chalice." Okay?
So funny story about that, speaking to ethnic parishes where it's not common to commune regularly. When Dana and I were fairly new Orthodox, we went to some sort of a meeting out in California, and that Sunday we went to St. Barbara's Orthodox Church, Greek Church in Santa Barbara, and we communed.
Beautiful.
Yes, it's breathtakingly beautiful.
Yeah.
And we communed, and we went to coffee hour, and people were coming up to us right and left, congratulations. What are they congratulating us about? Well, it was that big a deal to take communion that they were congratulating us.
There you go.
Weird. We didn't know what to think about that.
So, yeah. So that's common. Okay. So we're still dealing with that. No one has had a greater influence on the corrective than Alexander Schmemann, the former dean of St. Vladimir Seminary. And to this day, there are still people that burn Schmemann's books and other kinds of things like that in a reactionary way. Okay. I think I told you this story, but I'm going to repeat it because I'm old and I'm entitled to do that. I spoke at a conference at Holy Trinity Seminary in Jordanville. That's the Rocor Seminary in upstate New York. And I had many references to Father Alexander Schmemann in the paper that I gave. And their rector, who is a bishop, Bishop Luke, came to me during the break afterwards, and he said, Father Chad, I just want to congratulate you. You're the first person in the entire history of Holy Trinity Seminary in Jordanville who has spoken positively regarding Father Alexander Schmemann. So, but as I would like to remind people, Schmemann was not an innovationist. He was a restorationist. He gave us back what we have lost. Certainly, we've passed through an era in which metropolitans like Theodosius of the OCA, Iacobus of the Greek Archdiocese, Metropolitan Philip in the Antiochian Archdiocese, and even Anthony Bashir, who preceded Metropolitan Philip, they understood this and they got on board, and there was good positive teaching within those traditions about, why one gathers in Eucharistic assembly and becomes a participant in the actual communing process. So children are communed early on, and I can tell you as a priest with the blessing of the administering communion, there's nothing sweeter than a child who's a regular communicant. My favorite is when I commune them and they smack their lips. It's like, there you go. And sometimes just the doe-like look, because it's pretty clear they've practiced at home, and they know what they're doing, and they know that this is something special. That's different than the child who's being brought by grandma and hasn't been inside a church since he or she was baptized, and they're terrified because I'm like the doctor that's going to give them a shot, when they go in to see the ped. It's like, who is this strange man with this thing, So it's terrible. And I have many, many times said to the parent or whoever's holding the child, not today, because the child's just going wild. One more side story on that, then I'll move on. I once got a phone call from a church, a GOA church, there I said it, and sadly the priest had a heart attack the evening before, and it was a feast day. I think the feast of the Dormition, because I was free. So I said, yeah, I'll cover Orthros in the liturgy in the morning. So I found the church. I'd never been there before. I did my thing. I have just finished ablutions. You all know ablutions? That's when I'm cleaning the chalice and discos and things after everything's done. And some old guy kind of dotted in and he said, Father, the people need to see you in the front. And I said, now? He said, yeah. He says, it's about communion. So I thought, my word, what can that be about? So I left things at the proskomedia table and I went out, and it was grandparents with a granddaughter, and they smiled and said, she needs the juice. And I'll never forget it. But it's like, okay, so you arrive late after the liturgy, you bring the child up, and you say she needs the juice. So I was very calm, and I said, you're out of luck today because I've just finished cleaning up. So I'm giving you stuff that says this actually exists and is present, in our Orthodox, right faith, right believing world. So we got a lot of work to do. So that's why things like this are so important in the terms of a renewing and a rethink of several things, okay? So his little section there on page 163 on the Christian understanding of freedom. We have a rather unique understanding of freedom. It's not what, Dina Sefima was saying, at the beginning of this session, or one of you two, you do what you want to do, okay? This kind of individualism, and we're all free agents. We do what we want to do. There's no absolute truth to anything. And that's why smorgasbord religion in American society is at an all-time high. And Tamara Isabella Burton is the best theologian to give you a good understanding of this phenomenon in America. And it's very real. I'll have a little bit of this. I'm a Buddhist on Tuesday, and I'm a Southern Baptist, on Wednesday, because I like going to church on Wednesday night. They got a nice group over there, and they have really good cookies and whatever, okay? It's that kind of thing. So it's very strange. All right, so we're watching the clock. In 8, he deals with the question of women in the church, okay? This is another one which is it's out there in our day, and it's one of those questions which is going to need to be dealt with, I think, in an actual council setting. Even questions of deaconesses in the church, there's a wide movement, not wide, there's a loud, there's the right way to describe it, there's a loud movement in the Orthodox Church for the so-called restoration of deaconesses. I think that is probably a wrong-headed thing with the wrong motivation. Much of that has to do with power. I actually asked the head of the St. Phoebe Society, that's the group here, I said, isn't it really true that you're not after diaconal orders, but it's up the chart to Episcopal orders? And she said, you're a clever one, aren't you? And it's like, no, I've just been on that playing field before, thanks very much, okay? Now, so the question of deaconesses, I'm going to settle basically like this. Yes, there are references to deaconesses in Scripture, okay? But what is that? That's not what is defined there. What is clear from looking at anything historically with ordinals, including the ordinals for the making of deaconesses in the early church, is not the same right as major orders in terms of deacon, priest, and bishop. There was a real necessity for women functioning in that kind of capacity with baptism, because all baptisms were done in the nude, right? Okay? So
The first thing that the bishop said was, take off your clothes.
exactly. So there was a proper way of dealing with that one, and what was required in terms of the sake of modesty. But it's also clear, studying the history, that the deaconesses were basically kind of transformed into female monastic orders, and we had both widows and young women, consecrated virgins, who were basically running in the 2-track to form those kinds of communities. So that's where it's coming from. But there is within our current 2024, 2025 Orthodox world a voice for doing something different. And I think that we just need to buckle our seatbelts and know that that's going to be a lot of conversation, which is here. But he outlines, of course, what is something that you've heard from me many, many times, which is it is Christianity that actually totally altered the way that women were perceived in culture. Yeah.
People who are responsible of that,
For people,
who are responsible of that house, what do they see the duties of a deaconess? I mean, I'm not clear on what the duties or the duties would be of a deaconess. Aside from
Well, first of all, they would say that it's all the same. Okay, so there's no differentiation. Historically, that's simply not true. Um, and the deacon, who's in holy orders, is set apart for a liturgical function, yes, but also in terms of driving this service, pastoral kinds of ministries in the church, and that's also clear in the scripture. It wasn't right that the presbyters, i.e., the priests, were spending so much time dealing with feeding widows and orphans. So it's those kinds of things. But when you actually read through the documents and the articles and the other such things, if I think for a minute, I can pull up her name. It's all a sort of feminist equality kind of thing, and everything must be the same. So they're coming at the argument differently. And I wish that our bishops would actually lead us in a proper kind of all right, this is an issue that's been raised culturally, coming from outside of the church, but from inside the church, this is how we're going to respond to that. That's what I'd like to see. But we don't see it very well.
Well, and some of us come from a tradition where this is played out once already. So we know this story.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we know how it is. So look at the section, Christ and women, okay? All the references here in Scripture, the elevation of women in terms of culture and society. But unisex is not an Orthodox theology. It's a complementarian kind of equality, okay? Which is based on that understanding of anthropology that we find in the book of Genesis. Now, you're looking at the guy that brought back women students at St. Herman's that had disappeared. Best thing about bringing back women to St. Herman's Seminary is a couple of them were all-star basketball players. So in terms of church league, we'd always bring home the trophy. And it's the same, at St. Vladimir's. The last parish administration course that I taught, I had 7 women, including 2 nuns, in the class. And the normal way that the syllabus I had it structured was for those who were on ordination track. But I took time to meet with each of those 7 women to massage the syllabus so it would meet what their desires were, their needs, and particularly where they were going to put a focus in ministry. I had one young woman from Oregon who was headed towards a kind of Matushka Olga, our new saint Matushka Olga, ministry in terms of women victims of sexual abuse, domestic violence, that whole kind of thing. That was her passion. So I worked with her on that one. I have another one. She was an Indian student, East Indian, Malakaran Orthodox. And she also wanted to develop within her jurisdiction a kind of counseling avenue under the umbrella of the church that was specifically for the needs of women. So there's often kind of a little narrow section, but that's where we wanted to go. One of the nuns, by the way, her thing was fundraising. I thought that was pretty cool. And I get her stuff so I can see what she's doing, and she's pretty effective. She's not like the nun we all love from Colorado, just grousing everybody out there. She's got a very professional approach. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to you to work your way through here because of the constraints of time. But 9, where the headline is The Christian Life and the Way of Spiritual Endeavor. This really does just sort of break down to, I think, the very simple thing, which is Orthodox Christianity is not just another denomination where you find yourself on a Sunday morning when it's convenient for you to be there. It is your life. It's how you live. And it's kind of we get too many people, I think, who come in with the understanding in Orthodoxy that they're going to be the saviors of the antique Orthodox Church. You'll rarely hear me as your priest talk about ancient faith. Um, when they planted a museum in Topeka, Kansas for Orthodoxy, I about lost my mind. And I remember at the meeting, I said, "Look, people think that we're a museum already, so why are we going to contribute to that?" We used to get tourists that would come off the big tourist vessels in Kodiak, and they would come to the seminary grounds wanting to see the chapel, which was modeled on the very first Orthodox church ever built in North America in 1794. And they would say to us, "Are you like actors in costume?" Yeah. I mean, it was like going to Amish village or something. So, but I mean, were generally sophisticated Europeans or somebody, but they just didn't know who and what we were. So I think that's again what makes it's a big challenge for us. But as he says here, we're striving to enter through the narrow gate. And so we don't mind being odd, unusual, and having a different approach. So I'll stop, take a breath, and another drink. Have I scandalized anybody? That's okay. If I need a correction, I'll take corrections.
Well, harkening back to this business of to whom would Orthodoxy appeal? Young men who want structure, who want
Yeah.
they want some framework within to live their lives.
They want to
Young,
struggle.
yeah, yes, that's what young men need. Is they've been told in this culture that they're nothing. Every attempt has been made to feminize men, and men need discipline. They need structure. They need quests. They need a job. They need to go save something.
Yeah.
With themselves. And for the same thing for families. We've been told structure is not good. You don't need structure. And so everyone sits around being blue and unhappy and glum. And somebody says, I wonder what would happen if we try some structure here. And that's what Orthodoxy offers.
Yeah.
I think Father Josiah said, was there a video or one, I don't remember which, where he was talking about that same thing, where when men are feminized and they're in these mega churches, people are waving their hands. And what is that man to do to be a man?
Right. Father Josiah was interviewed for the New York Times, I think New York Times article, saying basically that.
For the New York Times.
Hmm?
He was interviewed for the New York Times.
New York Post.
Oh, I was going to say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There's something I wanted to say earlier about the Eucharist that taught me something very important. I don't remember when it was or how many years I've been Orthodox, but I remember there was one time when I was down in Wichita, and I had been feeling like I couldn't go to communion because I was struggling. And even though I'd gone to confession, I still was so aware of my tendency to whatever it was. I can't even remember what it was at this point, thank goodness. And so I felt like I'm not worthy enough to go to communion. I can't go to communion. And I mentioned that to Warren, my godfather, Warren Farhoff. And he very kindly just looked at me and said, well, to me, it's medicine for when I'm struggling. And it gives me strength. And he said, and that's all he said. He didn't say, so you think you should think of it that way or whatever. He just said, for me, it's medicine. And that.
And nothing we do will make us worthy.
That's right. Well,
It's He who makes us worthy.
that allowed me then to go to communion and start learning more about God's mercy.
Yeah. Those of us that are converts, we bring a lot with us, and those who are cradle born often don't have a whole lot in the treasury box, because it's just been assumed, your DNA is going to keep things going. I think that if you lived in a majority Orthodox country, there is some of that, but even in a majority Orthodox country, you just can't rely on that. It just doesn't work. And now, of course, we're influenced by everything globally in terms of the internet and whatever else. We don't live in little bubble worlds in a village in Bulgaria. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, one thing that I'm slowly coming to understand about Orthodoxy, which was not very clear to me for decades, and it speaks to, I suppose, in a broad sense, the community that in which we live, the Orthodox community, how we help each other, is many of us converts don't have a very clear-cut understanding of how important it is to be a God-parent.
Oh yes, yeah.
In the old country, you would commune with your godparents. You had a relationship, a strong relationship with your godparents. And I've never done that because I never knew I was supposed to do that. I mean, I was just kind of sprinkle some fairy dust, and you're a godparent. And it's in the last year or so I've come to realize the gravity of being a godparent.
Yeah. And again, our geography in America works against us.
Well, it can.
Often the godfather and godmother live in Nashville, and the godchild lives in Seattle. Okay, well, you all are just the most patient group of people. You all get a gold star by your name on the chart. We'll take a break. We, God willing, will be doing baptisms on January 12th. Is that right? Yeah.
What's that feast?
It's an after feast of Theophany.
Okay. Is that a Sunday?
Uh-huh. And I don't even know how to properly register a baptism now, because I found my old books, and I'm like the last priest that signed them. So and I know that this digital thing wasn't around that much. So I got a little bit of coaching again today. So I've got to figure out, how to do that. I'll get that done before that time. But that's again something that as your priest I will do always in a public way, not in a private way. I just simply will not do a private baptism. I think that that's a mockery. It's a contradiction. Private what? Believe it or not, in New York, I would still encounter priests who would do baptisms at home in the bathtub, as if they were still under communism, and you had to do it secret. I'm not kidding you. I mean, there still that exists. Thank God those are ancient of days priests for the most part, and are going to their rich reward in heaven somewhere. But that sort of thing is still there, and it just doesn't do. That doesn't mean to say that I won't. Of course, I'll do a baptism in extremis if something like that comes up, where a baby in the hospital or whatever it happens to be. But the idea of Abuna, we're going to come at 4 o'clock on Saturday, and we got you a nice bottle of Arak, and we'll take care of this. And to whom am I speaking? Yes. Who is this? Yes. We won't do that at All Saints. No matter what the accent. It can be a real good Kansas accent. It's like, no, doesn't play here. In the Orthodox Church in America, they have for many decades actually done baptismal liturgies, but they're not approved in the Antiochian Archdiocese. So we need to do all of that in between Orthros and the Divine Liturgy.
That means we have to start really early that morning.
Oh yeah, probably about 4 a.m. I don't know.
Now, how long does the baptismal service last? Is it about an hour or is it 40 minutes?
Well,
20 or 30 minutes.
So we're gonna have to start Orthros at 8:15.
yeah, but we're going to have we have 8 baptisms.
That many?
Mm-hmm.
Did you say
8.
8?
I have to be on stage at 2 p.m. that day at the concert.
So
We'll get you there. We'll get you there.
we just will the Byzantine chant that day. Without you, these 4-part Western harmony.
Whatever.
Okay.
We'll start
Thank you all.
Speaking of which, do we know about the Christmas liturgy?
I brought the thing, and I can talk to you tonight, or we can talk tomorrow.
We'll talk tomorrow.
Yeah, because we have to work in royal hours.
Well, we have always done that in the morning
Yeah, I know.
as a separate.
Exactly. That's how this old boy does it. But you will be amused when I show you the instructions from on high. And then, of course, it does say, but in your parish, if this doesn't really work.
Right.
That would be the morning of the 24th.
Do you all know what royal hours are?
Yeah, Michelle's been involved before.
Yeah, it has to do with the fact that the emperor and the empress would attend. And rather than doing the hours at the proper time, which takes all day, they're all put together, and it concludes with the Typica service and is done. And then,
I didn't know that it's called that because the royal. I don't know why I thought. I guess I thought.
Yeah, that's why, because when the Byzantine emperor was around, he would show up.
And he wanted to get through all the hours at once, huh?
well,
They're all depressed.
I think that that's the same true in a parish. I can't expect people in this parish on Christmas Eve to be showing up, for 6th hour and 9th hour, and
Nobody ever comes.
No. I'm talking about praying the hours at the set times
Right.
during the day.
Yeah, 4 times.
Oh,
4 times,
3.
4 times, 4 times coming for hours, and then the Vesperal Liturgy of St. Basil, which should conclude, according to the instructions, around sunset. Okay? And then the next day, one can have another full-blown thing.
So
No, I'm a nasty piece of work in my old age. I just read this, and it's like, this might work at Christ the Savior Cathedral in Moscow, but it's not going to work here.
so are we going to do a vesperal liturgy, or
Well, no, because what we want to do is we'll do a festal orthros, so that should make you all happy because you get to sing certain things. Yes, and Chrysostom's liturgy,
Okay.
and then everybody has Christmas Day free.
Yes.
So you still want to start like at 8 p.m. or 8:30 or something?
We'll work that out tomorrow, but something like that, not midnight.
No, good Lord, no.
Well, there are plenty of parishes that are doing that.
Oh, yes, we know.
Yeah.
You better not be having communion until midnight. Supposedly. Is the microphone turn it off.
My answer to that is, but doesn't the day start with Vesper?
Yeah,
It's already Christmas on Christmas Eve evening. It's already Christmas Day. So it's okay to take.
Well, but we're dealing with the Typicon, trying to get lots of things in there.
okay.
I'm also an expert on the Vladicon.